It was quite accidental actually. Starting a career in VC wasn't exactly something that I planned. The long and short of it was that back in 2015, when I was at Evernote, as you would imagine, I was an operator, but I started making some angel investments. And when I left the company, one of the opportunities that emerged was the opportunity to join Jungle Ventures to launch a seed fund.
Hi everyone, welcome to the podcast. So today we're joined by Tiang of Forge VC. So hi Tiang, could you share a bit about your pivot from Evernote into VC and what skills were required to make this pivot and to make this jump?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It was quite accidental actually. Starting a career in VC wasn't exactly something that I planned. The long and short of it was that back in 2015, when I was at Evernote, as you would imagine, I was an operator, but I started making some angel investments. And when I left the company, one of the opportunities that emerged was the opportunity to join Jungle Ventures to launch a seed fund. And I was thinking to myself, wouldn't it be interesting to understand how it works professionally as an investor on the other side of the table, right? If it sounded intellectually interesting, and I got the opportunity to meet and work with many founders, which is a passion of mine. And one thing led to another, and I ended up launching the seed fund called Seed Plus with Jungle in late 2015, early 2016.
So you had quite an accidental career into the VC space. So my next question is, so how can students get more involved in the Southeast Asia VC ecosystem and anything you could share on that front?
Sure. I think, well, at least here in Singapore, today there's a lot more mainstream awareness and consciousness around tech entrepreneurship, and coming along with that, a understanding of what venture capital is, right? In colleges in NUS, National University of Singapore, SMU, right, Singapore Management University. There are student-led VCs like Prodigy Ventures, and I'm sure there are other organizations that I know of. So there are platforms and avenues like this, which didn't exist when I was in college, more than 10 years ago. That now you are able to engage and participate, right? There are also a lot more venture firms across the region, and many of us take in interns. We have an internship program that we run every 6 months. So if you're interested, curious, and you want to learn more, definitely reach out. We're actively recruiting interns right now. That gives you a chance to be exposed into the day in and day out of the VC.
You made a great point about how students can get more involved through their school and their college. And so my next questions are now more on a masterclass on how to raise VC funding and what is Forge VC's investment thesis. So my next questions to you are more on those lines. So my first question is, so what is Forge VC's investment thesis, and could you share a bit more on that front?
Sure. So a couple of headlines here. We focus in Southeast Asia, pre-seed and seed. What that means then is we're typically the first investment into the company, or at least the first institutional round or startups raising. We can go as early as just a few people with an idea, or one people with an idea, right? With partnering with founders at that idea stage to as mature as you have a team, you have a product, there are a couple of customers, but there's revenue, but there's not definitively product market fit yet, right? And that's the entire spectrum in which we invest in. And it's so far we've done about 10 investments across the region, almost always leading rounds, because the philosophy here is that we want to partner and work really closely with founders, especially at the board level, right? Being really involved in helping them getting their idea off the ground, turning that into reality, and sending them on the path of product market fit. And of the 10, we've invested in a few in Singapore, a few in Vietnam, a few in Indonesia, and these are companies that are in consumer, software products, education, fintech, Web3, insurtech. It's a pretty broad spectrum of verticals which we've invested in. To us, the fundamental truth, if you will, is at the end of the day, working with exceptional founders that are building for the opportunities of tomorrow, right? We do have opinions about sectors that we want to be involved in, but at its core really it's about backing exceptional founders that are smart, driven, high hustle, and have ambition of building category defining companies of tomorrow. So that's the central idea here.
That's amazing. And so my next question is, so how did you fundraise for your VC fund, Forge VC, after you left Jungle Ventures? Any tips and pointers you could share with the audience who may be looking into starting their own VC fund as well?
Yeah, for sure. Well, the truth is that it's people say that fundraising is difficult, and it is, right? And it still is. I think at the end of the day, it really is about being very passionate about what you do, right? Because the default answer for many in conversations is no, right? Or maybe, right? And very few yeses. So you just have to keep going and be very diligent and tenacious about it. There are a few things that I think that are central to my operating principles, which is be very clear about who you are, what you do, what's your mission, and say that with clarity, right? And on top of that, I think a lot of people, it's hard to differentiate sometimes from one investor to the other. Track record helps, and thankfully I have a bit of a track record to prove that. But that that having been said, it's you still have to bring that message across, right? Proving differentiation is it's another big point here. You want to make sure that you communicate your strategy with clarity, and also with differentiation against what others are doing here, so that you stand out, right? It's a really noisy world out there. The more you could differentiate, the more you could stand out, the higher chance of being successful in fundraising. Yeah.
So I think that's some great tips. I think my biggest takeaway from all that was to prove differentiation and to have a strategy with clarity. So my next question is, so what did you learn as a VC? Any lessons and mistakes that you made over your tenure as a VC?
I continue to learn new things every day. I think that's one of the most interesting aspect of the job, right? Which is you learn new things every day about the world, about new industries, sectors, about people. But for me, though, I think some of the greatest lessons are not just lessons and insights that you glean that apply to how you get better at your job professionally, but broadly speaking, lessons that you can draw and generalize across different aspects of your life, right? And some of those are really at its core leadership principles that I get to really, really good founders build companies, manage their teams, build culture, and ultimately scale as a leader, starting from 0 to 1 to many. Because building a company is hard, right? And the role of a founder changes dynamically from day 0 to day 1, and post-product market fit as you're scaling, your role changes yet again, right? And the need for you to provide leadership to not just the team, but stakeholders in general changes yet again too, right? And to me, those are probably one of the best I guess experiences that I get to have through this journey, is to learn and hopefully mimic some of these leaders at work and apply that to my own life, right? How do I become a better leader for the other portfolio companies that I work with, the firm, at Forge, our team members and people around me.
I think my biggest takeaway in all that was to just learning and imbibing from the people that you're meeting is kind of one of the big things that you took away as a VC as well. And something that I also hope to learn more about the VC space and through doing interviews with people like you and others on the podcast. One question from Melinda Chu is, are there different trends in Southeast Asia going on compared to US? So like she was saying that US is more AI and generative AI are becoming very trendy right now. So what are the trends that you're seeing in Singapore?
I think so increasingly I think the world is flat and flatter yet, right? And the distribution for a lot of these technologies are felt almost always immediately, whether it's you're in Singapore, India, or US, right? When I remember OpenAI was just kind of came out publicly late last year, immediately within the next week or so, the board meetings that I am part of are already chatting about either incorporating some of this technology into their product roadmap and or think about the implications of generative AI in their businesses, right? And this is across different industries from education, insurance, corporate secretary. The impact is very wide, right? So from a trend perspective, I think it's something that increasingly and increasing velocity as well, that founders, no matter where you are, need to be a lot more aware of some of this fundamental shifts and development in technology. But if I bring it to a local context here, we as much as we can, we don't really look at trends that much from an investing perspective. To us, the way we think about it is that we try to organically work with founders that are, smart and driven. And by definition, smart and driven founders will naturally seek out some of the greatest opportunities that they can work on, right? So to us, it's really more about that rather than having a top-down view on which categories and sectors are interesting and continue to search within those, right? That having been said, it's not we do have our own opinions about which sectors, markets, or categories are interesting. And for myself, I've been spending a lot more time in health tech, and that's against a backdrop of the aging population here in Singapore and wider Southeast Asia, right? And the challenges that come with that demographic shift. How do we, because of this, use data and technology to tackle this problem, whether it's preventive healthcare or indirectly using maybe innovation in the insurance industry to help shape policy, work with governments across the region to tackle some of these problems as well. So I think there are massive opportunities in health tech, and that's something that I'm paying keen attention to.
Thanks for sharing your insights on health tech and like what you're personally interested in as well. And we just got a question from one of the people on Twitter called Mash, and he's asking how do you support the founders post investment? Like, what's your value add as a VC? And could you share any like tips for people as well on how they can also start adding value to founders?
So as I alluded to earlier, the way we invest is we tend to lead rounds. We'll take a board seat or be involved at the board level in a very deep way. And a lot of that, besides comes with the responsibility of being a lead investor and being a board member, right? On top of your fiduciary duties as a board member, ensuring governance, compliance, and just like the proper ins and outs of running a business. Beyond that, I always tell founders to think of us as their extended corporate development or business development team, what do I mean by that? So for one, I don't think we'll ever be able to help founders with product market fit. Because that's frankly, the superpower of a founder, right? They're by definition, if you're thinking about a problem day in, day out, you would definitely be that much better than someone who's not, right? So if you're working here, so for us, then it's about how do we fill in the gaps around of company building around product market fit. That includes helping, for instance, recruiting, for instance, establishing maybe early proof of concepts or getting to the table certain early customers that we have relationships and network with, or bringing to the table pattern recognition that we've seen across different companies and past experiences to help founders avoid making mistakes that are avoidable, right? So really is about, at the end of the day, three things. Number one is bringing our relationships to the table. Number two is bringing our experiences to the table. Number three is bringing, our skill sets to the table, right? Like for myself, for instance, I used to manage PR for Evernote out here in Asia, and so one skill I would have then is to help companies to shape their narrative in terms of communications, PR strategy, go-to-market strategy, and all, right? So these three things.
I think you perfectly summed up the value add and how you personally add value as well to founders. So my next question and my last question for you is, so I saw on LinkedIn that you have this newsletter called Dads in Tech. So where did the idea for that newsletter come about, and what's next? Like, what do you have planned for that newsletter, and anything you could share with the audience on that?
I have nothing planned for the newsletter. It's during the pandemic, everyone had like a pandemic project, some people might get into baking sourdough bread, some people like planting plants. For me, I started a newsletter called Dads in Tech. And as the title suggests, it's pretty obvious. It's about fathers working in technology. So I've interviewed globally, VCs, technologists, entrepreneurs, software engineers, product managers from Silicon Valley, from Japan, Korea, Indonesia, here, hoping to get India, and hoping to get more on the board. I'm a dad to a 5-year-old, well, soon to be 5-year-old son, and I'm really passionate about making sure that I'm a good father, right? So and through that journey, my dialogue and conversations with different people in the industry, I realized that there's a lot of wisdom that are not readily available online. So I decided to kind of put those content online into a newsletter and share it with the world. And hopefully that's my own way of making sure that I learn on a daily basis how to be a better father and help others around the world to do that too.
That's a really good kind of way to learn about how to become a better father, as well as also impart that knowledge to other people and get them also to learn how to be better fathers. And the strong personal connection and the why is very evident in everything that you've just shared. So it was an absolute pleasure and an honor to host you on the podcast today. And do share like how the audience can connect with you, and anything like any socials, how do they connect with you, and how do they reach out, maybe even to Forge VC? Like, what's anything that you can share on that?
Yeah, no, I'm super easy to find. I'm on Twitter, TIANG LIM. That's my handle. I'm on LinkedIn as well. So that's pretty easy. If you have a pitch deck, feel free to send it to hello@forge.vc, so that the team and I can get it. or if you're interested in an internship, right? So feel free to reach out to that email too.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, have an amazing day ahead. And once again, it was an absolute honor and pleasure to host you on the podcast.
Thank you. Appreciate it.